Goedenavond, Pakhuis de Zwijger. Ontzettend leuk dat jullie er allemaal zijn. Ja, kijk. Het is voor ons een ontzettend leuke, speciale avond. Leuk dat jullie met ons willen delen, deze live-opname van Europa Draait Door. Wij zijn altijd even benieuwd of er ook daadwerkelijk luisteraars van de podcast in de zaal zitten. Wie luistert er ongeveer elke week? Zo.
Dat is 89,3%.
Dat zijn goede aantallen.
Ja.
Wie is er van mening dat hij vanavond met een positiever gevoel naar huis gaat dan die binnen is gekomen? Toch? Ja, oké, enthousiastelingen.
3%.
Want Arend Jan, dat is met jou erbij altijd een beetje lastig, weten de meeste mensen hier wel.
Maar gelukkig hebben we een positieve gast.
Ja, zeker.
Dat gaat helpen volgens
Die helemaal niet denkt dat de hel en verdoemenis over ons heen komt, hè?
Precies. Hij denkt zelfs dat Europa een toekomst heeft.
Meen je dat nou?
Echt? Gaat hij zeggen?
Want, ja, vertel maar even, daar zijn we natuurlijk ontzettend trots op. Wie zit er straks bij ons vanavond op de bank?
Wij hebben echt, jongens, voor het eerst in de podcast een Nobelprijswinnaar.
Ja.
Huh?
Ja.
Niemand minder dan Paul Krugman. En Paul Krugman is natuurlijk een top-econoom. Hè? En die weet dat te verbinden met fantastische artikelen, columns bij de New York Times. Tegenwoordig een Substack, 500.000 lezers. Hè?
500.000 lezers, hè?
En hij is de schrik van elke politicus. Want Paul Krugman heeft data. Die heeft altijd stellingen, maar die worden onderbouwd met data. Nou, er zijn natuurlijk nogal wat fact-free politicians. Hè? Dus die man is heel invloedrijk. Heeft zowel kritiek op de Republikeinen als op de Democraten. Heeft eigenlijk een hele onafhankelijke positie.
Ja.
En we gaan natuurlijk met hem praten over Trump en over Amerika en over alles.
Zeker. En dat laten we even zien op een kort kaartje. Dit gaan we met jullie allemaal doen. Zometeen vragen we inderdaad Paul Krugman om bij ons op het podium te komen. We hebben ook Thomas Bolle gevraagd. Hij is econoom en onderzoeksjournalist om bij ons zometeen op de bank te komen zitten. Arend Jan en ik beweren, vinden we van onszelf dat we heel veel weten. Maar economen zijn we natuurlijk niet. Dus vandaar dachten we, na het gesprek met Paul Krugman vragen we Thomas er ook nog even bij. Die wat prikkelende stellingen heeft voorbereid nog voor Paul Krugman. En ik vermoed dat jullie misschien ook wel wat vragen hebben die jullie graag willen stellen. Dus als we daarbij zijn aangekomen, krijgen jullie dus ook nog de kans om een vraag te stellen vanavond. Nou ja, volgens mij is het wel een aardig moment om even kort naar de actualiteit te gaan. Hebben jullie gezien dat Trump in China was afgelopen week? Nou, kijk, Arend Jan vond dit een beetje een matige opkomst net zo op het podium. We willen toch even laten zien, Arend Jan stuurde mij dit toe. Hij zegt, kunnen we dit niet doen in het Pakhuis de Zwijger? Hoe Xi en Poetin door al die schoolkinderen verwelkomd werden. Laten we heel even kijken.
Kijk, dat is het betere werk, hè?
Ja, toch?
En je ziet ook dat Trump ervan geniet, hè?
Maar die arme kinderen bleven maar springen. Hè? Zie je, het gaat maar door. Daar hebben ze jaren op geoefend. En let op, nu gaat Trump ook even klappen voor de kinderen. Dat vond ik ook heel mooi, dat hij dat toch nog even deed. Ja. Maar Arend Jan, even over dit bezoek. Hè? Want ja, voor Trump was dit echt wel weer belangrijk. Om weer even naar, in zijn ogen, een van de grotere, machtige mannen in de wereld, handje te kunnen drukken. Maar
hij heeft helemaal niks bereikt.
Nee.
Helemaal niks. We zien dus al een machtsverschuiving gaande. Dat China gewoon is holding the better cards. Hè? Dus het is toch wel interessant hoe snel dat dan gaat. En je zag dus dat Trump, die was aan het charmeren. Heb je ooit Trump meegemaakt die aan het complimenten geeft en aan het charmeren? Dat deed hij daar. En Xi was een soort mandarijn. Je kon geen emotie op zijn kaken ontdekken. Ik heb ervan genoten. Ik heb er echt van genoten.
Eigenlijk is want zeker als je het in Chinees spreekt, kunnen we er toch weinig van verstaan. Maar wat er non-verbaal gebeurt bij dit soort ontmoetingen is eigenlijk net zo fascinerend. Hè?
Body language.
Kortom, komt zo meteen ook nog wel te sprake. I'm going to switch to English. I'd like you to ask... I'd like you, the audience, to give our main guest a very warm welcome. Paul Krugman, please come to the stage. Have a seat. So. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Krugman, during this live recording of our podcast, Europa Draait Door.
Well, thanks for having me. Hope that I can deliver some value.
We expect.
Am I supposed to be funny?
Well, whatever you wish.
Okay.
I mean, the world is not in a very funny place at the moment. Mr. Krugman, Arend Jan just introduced you in Dutch, told the audience that you have like 500,000 readers on your Substack.
578,000, but who's counting?
That's an impressive number, isn't it? And we were wondering, because I mean, it looks like you're still working like 7 days a week, writing a lot. You give a lot of interviews still as well. Even in the coming night, you're giving an interview, I've heard.
Yeah. I did a Substack live here in a room off to the side because I was talking to Heather Cox Richardson, who has 3 million readers.
Yeah.
So it's a new world.
I can imagine. And we were wondering what your secret is, what your source of energy is. And what we found is that a lot of pictures of you with your cat.
Well,
that seems the one who helps you a lot, we heard.
He is often not. He would prefer that I do less.
What's his name, by the way?
This is Jack.
Jack, right.
And he will often come, as I'm trying to do some writing, he'll try to stop me. But anyway, it's very much, I guess you could say he participates. The other source of energy is sitting right here, which is Robin Wells, my wife.
Your wife,
and colleague. But anyway.
But does give Jack you some mental support in these gloomy times?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we all need some personal space. If you're entirely occupied with dwelling on the latest news, I mean, actually, the person I was just speaking to in the Substack Live, she said, I took 4 hours off and I came back and I heard about the slush fund for the first time. There are outrages every day, so you must take some time.
Yeah.
You have to take some pleasure in other things. Kind of why I usually put some music at the end of the posts, which is just partly a comment on it, but partly just a break, because you want some joy in the world still.
Exactly, yeah. We definitely need it. Arend Jan, is that why you start to have cats as well, by the way?
I like cats very much. Cats are the epitome of arrogance and wisdom.
Right.
They're so terribly arrogant. They don't even watch you in the face if you say something to them.
True, yeah. And Mr. Krugman, we saw that you wrote on your Substack recently, because you're in Europe for a few weeks already, right? You've been to Italy, now here in the Netherlands. That I'm still in Europe, you wrote, where one of the luxuries I'm experiencing is not having to think about Donald Trump and a nightmarish state of US politics 100% of the time. Well, guess what we're here for tonight?
Well, yes, it's unavoidable. In another time, we might be talking about bad things happening elsewhere, but what can I say? Right now, the United States is the center of the world, and not in a good way.
Yeah. We're going to discuss with you the consequences of the war in Iran at the moment, the state of American economy and politics, and also the relationship between the US and Europe. And to start with the consequences, especially the economic consequences of the war in Iran, we can show you a ticker that shows us a tracker, actually, the amount of money that the US has spent on the war in Iran. It's almost 87 billion at the moment. It's an impressive number in a way.
Yeah, although in many ways that's almost the least of it. I mean, yes, it's an awful lot of money, and if this money had been spent on this is enough to keep millions of children fed for a year. It's enough to keep hundreds of thousands of children in healthcare for a year. So it's a lot of money, but the consequences are much bigger than just the direct spending on the war. Ultimately, the most important thing is that an awful lot of the world's commerce normally passes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's 20% of the world's oil, a large part of the world's fertilizer, liquefied natural gas, helium, which turns out to be not just for party balloons, but for semiconductor manufacture, right? So this is a huge disruption. Unfortunately, the costs are falling everywhere, and not just, in some ways hitting other parts of the world worse than it hits the United States, although we're paying a heavy price as well.
Oh, and we've seen that for President Trump, there's no easy way of getting out of this war at the moment. And wasn't he the one who promised his electorate, when he became president for the second time, no forever wars?
Yeah, he promised a lot of things, but that was one of them. He also promised to cut energy prices in half, and the grocery prices would come down on day one. So these were all, but he had no way of making the energy price promises, the price promises come true. But there was a simple way to not have foreign wars, which is to not start one. He didn't honor that.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, there are wars. I'm not a pacifist. Wars sometimes must be fought. But this one was purely. There was no strategy. There was no necessity. In fact, President Obama negotiated a pretty good deal with Iran, which Trump ripped up really just because it had Obama's name on it.
Yeah.
And so this was completely unnecessary, and it was just, it was ego. It was him looking for a way to change the subject from all the other things that are going wrong on his watch. And now here we are with this global mess.
Yeah. Prices are going up. I mean, people are feeling the consequences of this war.
Yeah, and there's a lot worse probably to come. I will say that I talk to two kinds of people about this. I talk to financial types who are upset but not totally, as we would say, hair on fire. And then there are people who are actually experts on energy who are hair on fire. Because we're still living sort of in a fool's paradise. We've lost 14 million barrels a day of global oil production, and we're meeting that partly by drawing down inventories. So we're actually burning through 6 million barrels a day of oil that's in storage, but we're running out of that. So things will get much worse unless there's a peace very soon, and there's no sign of that.
And guys, gas prices are already up 28% since the start of this war. 28%.
Well, that's gasoline in the United States.
Yeah.
It's natural gas. Natural gas in Europe, not so much in the United States. That's one of those things where other people are bearing the cost, but it's much worse than that. So it's this is, the United States, we're a rich country, so people are angry and upset. Europe is a rich continent, so people are angry and upset. People in Africa, people in the poorer countries of Asia, it's more than being upset. There are actually, people will be impoverished and in some cases die because of this.
Yeah. Interesting thing is, last weekend, Donald Trump was asked about the consequences for Americans, actually, the cost of this war. And he basically said, well, that's none of my business. Let's have a look.
The only thing that matters when I'm talking about Iran, they can't have a nuclear weapon. I don't think about American financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing. You cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's the only thing that matters.
Yeah, so apparently...
This was a classic, it's called a Kinsley gaffe, where a Kinsley gaffe is when a politician unintentionally tells the truth.
Yeah. But what I find so depressing is that the Iranians have been attacked by all these bombardments. Now they have a damned good reason to develop a nuclear weapon in the next 10 years. And that's his main argument.
Well, it wasn't really, it wasn't really, that's the after-the-fact rationalization.
Yes.
Right, what he really wanted, it's clear, was he wanted a victory. He attacked Venezuela and he deposed one vicious dictator and replaced him with another vicious dictator, but he thought he could pull that off in Iran. And he wanted a short, victorious war, which is a slogan that comes from Russia going to war with Japan in 1905, which didn't work out well. But this is, or it's Argentina invading the Malvinas, looking for a way to distract from his problems with a war. And as usually happens, war doesn't actually follow your script. And so that's what's really going on now, is saying, we needed to do this to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. But as I was saying, we had a perfectly good agreement on nuclear development that was negotiated by President Obama. And Trump ripped it up because we can't have anything that Obama did working.
Well, the interesting thing is, because of this war, his approval ratings have fallen since the lowest point since his second term in office. Yeah. The midterms are coming up in November. What is your expectation? Will the electorate, the Trump voter, move away from him because of what he's doing in Iran?
Well, Iran is only the latest bit. I mean, he was already falling drastically in the polling because of the because of everything, because he hasn't fulfilled his promises on prices, he hasn't fulfilled his promises on many things. The anti-immigrant policies, even for all of the nastiness that often prevails in politics, even so, people are outraged and horrified at what we've been doing. And we had some local, state and local elections last November, which were a huge defeat for Trump and his allies. But one of the things that's worrying is that they are doing everything they can to steal the midterm elections. The U.S. system with the games they can play with districting, that has already. We now think that in order to take the House of Representatives, the Democrats would have to win the popular vote by 4 or 5 percentage points, which they probably will do because people are so upset, but who knows what else they will try. But yeah, the electorate is turning. A lot of people who naively voted for Trump because they thought he would bring down grocery prices have turned hard against him. But we're still very much in danger.
Well, we have to say, we have a clip of Trump during his campaign in 2024 when he promised to bring down grocery prices because the Democrats, if they would have been in power, it would have been much worse.
Former President Trump surrounded himself with grocery store items at his Bedminster Golf Club Thursday, talking about the cost of food.
Grocery prices have skyrocketed. Cereals are up 26%. Bread is up 24%. Butter is up 37%. And many items are up at much higher rates than that. Now Kamala is reportedly proposing communist price controls. She's running on the Maduro plan. We call it the Maduro plan, like something straight out of Venezuela or the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to listen to this, right? This is only 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we knew that this wasn't going to happen, that he had no plan at all. Or I knew, but unfortunately, a lot of voters are fairly low information, and I guess people were upset. Prices did go up a lot, mostly in the early aftermath of COVID, because there was a lot of disruptions, and also because of Putin invading Ukraine, which drove up a lot of prices. But and people thought, they remembered that things were better in 2019, and Trump was president then. And what they didn't understand is things were better in 2019 because we had not had a pandemic and because Putin hadn't invaded Ukraine yet. So anyway, now we're stuck with, for the time being, with this guy. And
but what do you think? Are we approaching a turning point, especially among his own voters? Because you even see influential Trump supporters like Tucker Carlson or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who are also turning against him out loud, saying we cannot support this guy anymore.
Well, yeah. I mean, there has been a huge swing. I mean, if you actually look, one of my friends and contacts, G. Elliott Morris, who does a lot of polling analysis, he identifies what he calls low information voters. And that's not a pejorative. He's not insulting them. He's just trying to identify. And it's actually people who don't know which party controls Congress. That's a low information voter by his definition. They voted heavily for Trump in 2024, and they have now turned massively against him because the results are not there. The results are just the bread and butter issues are going the other way. So the only question really is not will the American public turn against him. It has already. The question is whether they can rig the system, whether we've gone far enough down the authoritarian road that we can't turn away, even if the public turns against it.
Do you expect these midterm elections in November? Are they going to be free and fair in any way?
No, I mean they're already rigged in terms of the way that the vote is set up. There will be attempts to interfere. There may be. We don't know how it will play out, but there may be. ICE, the federal immigration agents, may show up at polling places and try to intimidate voters. Anything is on the table. Now, the most encouraging thing that's happened for someone like me is believe it or not, the election in Hungary, which the tactics that the U.S. Republican Party is trying to use to turn us into a one-party state are in many cases actually specifically copied from Orban and Fidesz in Hungary. And they really, Orbán really had built a really strong dike, if you like, against losing power. But if the sea is high enough, it overtops the dike, which is what happened in Hungary. And that's what we're hoping will happen in the United States in November.
Mm-hmm. How worried are you, Arend Jan, in the way the US is moving towards less and less a democracy and maybe moving toward an Orbanian-Hungary-style country?
I very much fear that there is this autocratic temptation. Eh? So if the ICE people go to the electoral posts and intimidating people, then he can really rig it. It would have a tremendous influence in the world because all the crooks in the world will say, oh, we can do this too. Yeah? And it's now justified because the democratic bacon in the world is doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. I'm really afraid that it's going to happen because Trump is surrounded by people who are always yes saying. Huh?
I would like to show you a shocking example of this. It comes from a judicial hearing in the Senate in the US, where federal judges, nominated federal judges, have to undergo a hearing, have to undergo questioning by senators. They will be appointed because Trump appointed them. There is a majority for Republicans in the Senate, but there are still Democratic senators, obviously, and they can ask these federal judges questions. And there's one, Richard Blumenthal, he's from Connecticut, and he asked a very simple question to these newly appointed judges. Who won the 2020 election? Have a look.
Who won the 2020 election?
Senator, I wanted to be mindful of the canons here. I know this question has come up many times in these hearings, and become an issue of significant political dispute and debate. So with that, I'd say that President Biden was certified the winner of the 2020 election.
He won the election. Is that your response?
Senator, I think my response is he was certified as the winner by counting the electoral.
So you're unwilling to say he won the election. How about you, Mr. Roberts?
I apologize, Senator. I have the same answer as my colleague, Senator.
Same answer as the previous one?
The previous nominee. The Senate did.
Mr. Coons, how about you?
Thank you, Senator. And I have the same answer as Mr.
Same
Hendershot.
answer. Unwilling to say that Joe Biden won the election, correct?
As Mr. Hendershot said, it has become a matter of political concern, and Joe Biden.
Well, it's a matter of political concern, but it's also an issue of fact. I am amazed and really appalled that nominees for a lifetime appointment to the federal bench are unwilling to respond on an issue of fact, which I think really reflects not only on your honesty, but really on your fitness to be a federal judge, because you are supposed to be independent. And I think it's pretty irrefutable that Joe Biden won the election, but you're unwilling to use that word because you are afraid. You are afraid of what? President Trump?
Sorry, I fall silent every time I see this clip. What does this tell you, Mr. Krugman?
First of all, if I might say, Blumenthal, I mean, it's acceptable. He's lying when he says he's amazed. He knew that was the response. Right? We all understand that. No, we are much further down this path than many people were willing to admit until recently. We essentially have a would-be dictator as president. We have a party that is completely now behind him in this authoritarian push. The question now is not what he and his party will try to do. The question is, what can they achieve? How far can they go? So we are very much, the clock is very close to midnight on U.S. democracy. And if you know, it's an uncomfortable thing. A lot of people, certainly a lot of people that are kind of in my current business, which is commentary and policy analysis and all of that, would like to stay away from it, would like to turn down the temperature and avert their eyes and let's talk about the sources of GDP growth or something like that. And you know, I do some of that, partly because these things remain important, and partly because I need to keep my own sanity.
But why is it? Are people just in denial of
there's a
what's
lot of
really
denial.
happening, or why is it that they don't want to talk about it?
Oh, because it is harsh. It's political. People will yell at you. I mean, if you even now, I know journalists who get upset when people send them hateful letters and emails. Right? It's oh my God, I must have done something wrong. Whereas you know, I've reached having been through this for a long time now, I've reached the point where if I don't get a lot of hate after I write something, I know that I've wasted the day. So, but it's obviously people. There's still, I think it's mostly going away now. But there was a long time when many people did not want to believe that we're living in the world we're actually living in, because it's an uncomfortable and frightening thing. So, but you know, there we are. It's twilight in America, to turn Reagan's phrase around. We are very close to losing it all, but not beyond hope. That's the thing. We can still we do what we can.
Yeah. And Arend Jan, in the meantime, here in Europe, we behave sometimes like we're paralyzed about what's happening in the US. We don't really know how to deal with the White House, with President Trump. Sometimes we try to be as kind as we can. Sometimes you see a European leader telling him off, actually. Doesn't happen a lot, but what would you advise, Mr. Krugman, to European leaders? What's the best way to deal with Donald Trump?
No, the most important thing, and
you've seen the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, the Dutchman.
Yeah, he's been awful. He keeps on talking. Look, Rutte keeps on saying, "Oh, there's no way that the European Union can stand up to Russia without the United States." My God, look, just economics, right? The European Union, I should have the number exactly in my head, but roughly speaking, the U.S. has a GDP of like $30 trillion. The EU is like $25 trillion. Russia is more like $4 trillion. The EU is a superpower if it chooses to be one. It certainly has the resources to stand up against foreign aggression, to stand up for democracy. It does not need the United States. It would be nice if we could be allies the way we once were, but pretending that this is still the America that you were used to is just delusional, and it delays the process of taking things on your own shoulders. I mean, I'll give you a real, this is happening as we speak. Trump abandoned Ukraine. More than that, he's actually pro-Putin. That's obvious now. And not a dollar of U.S. aid has flowed to Ukraine in the past year. It's all the aid is now from the EU. And guess what? Ukraine survives. The EU, with barely, it's almost rounding error relative to the European economy to supply Ukraine with enough money to keep on defending its democracy. And this is a demonstration, actually, of European potential independence, that you don't need the United States to defend your eastern gate. And and there's much more of that. I mean, in terms of, if we actually get into the idea that the United States can punish Europe by imposing tariffs, first of all, Europe is not that dependent on the U.S. market, and also, U.S. companies basically sell as much in Europe as European companies sell in the United States. The idea that Europe is the weaker partner here is just the phrase, learned helplessness. Europe has spent too many years relying on the United States to take national security decisions, but now stand up for yourselves.
Yeah. Arend Jan, it doesn't seem that we in Europe believe that we are a superpower, that we are able to make these big decisions and don't be as afraid of Trump's warnings as we probably are.
We have a huge common market, and also we are investing in defense to a very large extent. And what I find really interesting is that we know we can't trust Trump anymore. So now we have to rely on Ukraine and Ukraine rockets. So we have a much more healthy relationship with Ukraine because European security starts with cooperation in Ukraine.
Yeah. Is the US still an ally?
I'm afraid that Trump is not an ally. Trump is an ally of Putin.
Yeah, and we should mention that it's not just that Trump and those around him don't want to play the role of guarantor of global freedom and all that. They specifically dislike Europe. If you look at the rhetoric, especially actually from people like Vice President Vance, but there is a specific dislike of Europe for exactly the reasons that Americans used to value Europe. You know, there's the democratic values, there's the belief in, to some extent, in trying to make a decent society, and to some extent the openness, cultural openness. And okay, we all have issues with immigration, but some notion that identity, membership in a society is about more than blood and soil. And those are the things that, you know, well, look, I mentioned Orban again. You know, it's not just that the U.S. right has been modeling itself on Orban. The Trump people went all out. I mean, we had the Vice President of the United States campaigning for Orban in this last election, which, now one good thing that I don't think Trump and his people have figured out is that they actually have a very powerful role in foreign elections. If Trump steps in to support someone, that probably dooms them. I mean, we have a very good prime minister in Canada, thanks to Trump, who opposed him.
Mark Carney, you mean?
Yeah, Mark Carney is if I could say, Mark Carney is intelligent, well-informed, actually an economist, and also has a sense of humor, every one of which would disqualify him for a major leadership role in the United States. But anyway, but he owes it. The Liberal Party in Canada was facing electoral doom until Trump started talking about, we should annex Canada.
Yes.
And now Carney is a successful prime minister, and this is happening elsewhere as well. So yeah, but you do need. The United States is not a full-on enemy, and most people in the United States are not enemies. But Trump and the people around him really dislike. They dislike actually everything that's good about Europe.
Yeah. This week, European Parliament ratified a trade deal between the EU and the US. We see pictures here of a meeting last year between Ursula von der Leyen and Donald Trump. Do you think that's important, that this trade deal is there? Will it benefit us in Europe? Or is this just the only way we can deal with Trump to make sure this economic relationship sustains at least?
I think the deal was a mistake. Yes, it may forestall some U.S. tariffs, but one thing I hope that people have figured out is that for Trump, a solemnly signed agreement is a suggestion. He routinely violates. I mean, the whole Trump trade war, aside from being illegal, even under U.S. law, which has been a source of instability, is clearly illegal under international law. The trade agreements, the trading system that Trump just ripped up wasn't just something that we were doing because we felt it was the right idea. It was agreements. We signed elaborate agreements with many of the world's countries, including the European Union. So if Trump has torn up one deal, he can tear up the next one anytime he feels like it. And I think that Europe was. I understand that people were really shocked in the moment by the Trump trade war, but I think conceding to him was a mistake, and will just encourage more. And maybe you buy a few months' peace with this latest thing. And along the way, by the way, this is a violation of Europe's treaties. Europe has made agreements with the rest of the world that assure them of most favored nation status. Basically, it has signed agreements that say that all of the countries with whom we have trade deals will be treated the same, and then they give special treatment to the United States. Well, that's actually a violation of Europe's agreements. It's not on the same scale as what Trump has done, but I was unhappy to see. I was kind of hoping that Europe would, in the end, just say, "No, the hell with this." Yeah. But all right, with water under the bridge. But looking forward, no more. Von der Leyen needs to say to Trump, "You don't have the cards." The United States really does not have that kind of economic leverage.
I think that Europe was so afraid that Trump was unwilling to sell weapons to Europe, which we would give to Ukraine, that we were almost prepared to sign every trade deal, and this was a very bad one.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, among the things we've learned is that the superiority of U.S. weapons is kind of not as absolute as people might have imagined. Again, this is sort of not my area, but obviously I'm paying attention, and my God, Trump went to war against what should be a fourth-rate power and lost.
Let's move back to your area, the economy, and the state of the European economy, which you write about a lot as well. 2 years ago, Mario Draghi, former Italian prime minister, former European Central Bank president, came out with this famous report where he made some very concerning remarks about the state of Europe.
It's do this or it's a slow agony.
Because you see, the problem of Europe is that it depends on trade much more than US or China. Europe was a train that wasn't unable to leave the station.
This is a future in which Europe risks becoming subordinated, divided, and deindustrialized at once. It's going to be a slow agony. And think about the fact, what I said at the beginning, population is declining, and by 2040, 2 million workers a year will disappear from the labor market. It's all, I mean, the impression of a sudden death is concealed by the fact that we are less and less.
You've been very positive, actually, about Europe's capabilities, especially on the world stage. But if you've read this report as well, of course.
Of course.
Do you agree with what Mario Draghi says about the state of the European economy?
Let me say first off that Mario Draghi is, one, criticizes him very cautiously because Draghi is, I think, the greatest central banker in history. He rescued the euro with 3 words, whatever it takes, and is a very smart guy and a very, and most of the recommendations in the Draghi report are actually very good. Many of the things he talks about that are wrong with the way Europe conducts business, with the imperfect nature of the European, the continued fragmentation of European markets, the inadequate investment in infrastructure, and so on. I think it would be great if everything that's recommended in the Draghi report is implemented. But the view that Europe is sort of falling behind, and Draghi is much more cautious in what he says in the report than what a lot of hostile commentators say. But the idea that Europe is really falling behind is largely based on a misunderstanding of the numbers. The truth is that in basically information technology, Europe has ceded a lot of the cutting-edge information technology industries to the United States and to some extent to China. And that's very conspicuous. Right now we're all talking about AI, and none of the big AI players are European. But that, the first analogy I like to use is to look within the United States. And a very large part of information technology in the United States is in California or around Seattle. And if you look at the United States, the difference in productivity growth between California plus Seattle and the rest of the United States is actually wider than the difference between the United States and Europe. And yet you don't have Texans going around saying, oh, what's wrong with us? Why is Texas lagging so far behind California? Right? This is just that certain industries tend to be highly concentrated. And the benefits, and this is where it really becomes important, the benefits of rapid technological progress mostly don't accrue to the people who are actually in that industry. They accrue to all the people who use the technology. And so the other analogy I like to use is computer industry versus healthcare. So if we look at the, since around 1990, we have numbers in the United States. Now these are measuring productivity and technology is difficult because it's new stuff. But still, as we measure it typically, productivity in the technology sector has risen by a factor of about 14 since 1990, about 10% a year year after year after year. Productivity in hospitals, as best we can measure it, really hasn't changed at all. And so does this mean that workers in tech have seen a gigantic gain in income and doctors have become poor? No, it hasn't. It means mostly, some people in technology have made a lot of money, but mainly it means that what in 1990 would have been considered a supercomputer is sitting in my pocket, and the benefits are passed on mainly to consumers. The United States versus Europe is actually, it's a lower, a diminished version of that, but it's kind of like that. The tech sector, to simplify it a bit, but the tech sector is in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so that's in the United States, so it shows up in the US numbers, but the benefits are accruing all around the world. And if we actually look at the value produced per worker, in Europe, it's in the Euro area, actually value produced per worker hour, it's currently a little under 90% of what it is in the United States. Mm-hmm. And if we go back 25 years, it was about 90% of what it was in the United States. There's been no downward trend in European productivity measured in terms of the value of stuff that workers produce. So the idea that Europe is falling desperately behind is wrong. There are reasons to be concerned about dependence on the United States for advanced technology, or dependence on the United States and China for advanced technology, but they're more geopolitical than they are in terms of prosperity. Yeah. And Europe is, in terms of productivity, Europe is doing fine. The demographics, yes, Mario Draghi is right, that the lack of sufficient numbers of Europeans heading forward is something to be concerned about, although we're starting to have we're doing that to ourselves in the United States now.
We can definitely do with some of your positivity around the state of Europe, Mr. Krugman. To sum up our conversation for now, because you also portrayed a pretty bleak picture of the situation in the United States at the moment, do you see a glimpse of hope as well when it comes to your own country, when it comes to the state of democracy? Is there an era you can see coming after Trump that might change things for the good as it was in the past, maybe?
Oh, yeah. If I had to say this past year, I'm much more hopeful about the future of the United States than I was a year ago. Because it's turned out that there is a deeper reservoir of decency in ordinary people in the United States than I think many of us realize. And I'm not just talking about polling and elections, but I don't know how much people in Europe were following the events in Minnesota. But we had this full-on assault that was on a community that was based upon the belief that as long as you were going after people who looked and sounded different, that white non-Hispanic Americans wouldn't care. And it was totally wrong. The community totally rallied around basic human decency. It turns out that the general American public is a lot better than the people who want to destroy us think they are. And now, is that enough? That remains to be seen. But I have to say that a lot of people, kind of when Trump was returned to the throne, just said, okay, that's it. That's the future. We are on a path towards one-party rule. And not so easy, actually. It turns out that there's a lot more pushback. So no, I'm much more hopeful about that for the United States than I was, but I'm not confident. I'm still scared as hell. But I think the possibility of it going right is much stronger than we feared.
Paul Krugman. Ja, het mag klap worden. I'd like to move to our second guest of the night. That's Thomas Bollen. He's an economist and an investigative journalist. Please, Thomas, enter the stage. Have a seat. You write for Follow the Money. You published a book quite recently as well. Geld genoeg, maar niet voor jou.
Yes.
Very good title. First of all, do you agree with Mr. Krugman's analysis about where we are in Europe and what should happen to not make the gap between Europe and the US too big?
Well, I would like to talk a bit about how we got in this situation. Because we've been talking a lot about Mr. Trump. but how come people voted for him, and what were the economics that we were practicing before he was in power? So we had a policy of globalization, open borders, free trade, and especially no capital controls. Money going around the world could go from one country to another one. And the promise was it would deliver for all of the people, economic growth, prosperity for all. But it somehow let us down, because inequality rose. A lot of people, especially the middle class here in Europe and in the US, didn't profit from it. And that gave rise to discontent, and now people voted for Trump. He's applying something completely different, tariffs, nationalist economic policy. So my question is, shouldn't we look more critical to the period before, and what lies ahead? Should we go back to where we were, or should we also change things and maybe take something good from what Trump is doing?
No, there's no question that a lot of people were just way too complacent about globalization, but just in general, utter sort of no guardrails. Let's let capitalism rip, and a rising tide will raise all boats, and all of that. That was we learned a lot that said that was less true than people thought. I would question how much you can explain the rise of the radical right, either in Europe or the United States, by those economic stresses, but they're very real. And I would say it's not just, there are many dimensions in which we've failed to fully appreciate the downsides of, if you like, of unleashed capitalism. I would say that a really big story actually is about regions and communities. We talk a lot about aggregate income, about even about the median family, but what about people who are stuck in left behind parts of the country? And you see that everywhere. You see that whether it's if you were to look at where is MAGA strongest in the United States, it's in the left behind regions of America. If we look at Germany, where is the AfD dominant? And it's the former East Germany, which is abandoned, and so on. You see these regions everywhere in the Western world. So we didn't do enough for that. That said, we certainly need to have a more open, we need to have more flexible, I'd say more interventionist policies to help the left behind, both regions and people. But that in itself is not enough. I mean, if you look, the United States, we had the Biden administration, which actually did a lot to try and turn it around. The Biden administration, some of my more purist free trade friends were constantly saying, oh, Biden is too protectionist, is too nationalist, there's too much industrial policy. Why is he directing all of this money to backward regions instead of letting the money go to where the highest returns are? But in fact, there was a lot. And in many ways, it was successful according to the numbers, but people voted for Trump anyway. So I think that we need to work on these things, but to think that economic justice is enough to save democracy, it's not. It's something we should be doing, but if you think it's the magic bullet that will deal with all of these demons that are now appearing in our world, it's not.
Because Thomas, are you afraid that especially globalization plays a big part in the rise of the populist right? In a way, do you see that connection very strongly in contrary of what Paul Krugman is saying?
Yeah, just the things that Paul pointed out. If you are hungry or you're not happy with your income, you can't buy the stuff you want to buy. That discontent we see that in Europe as well, in countries that are left behind, and the people who are left behind vote for these populist leaders. So I think there's a big connection, and you saw it with the rise of Nazi Germany. You saw that as well, that in the 30s, the people who were discontent voted for the Nazi party. So I think there's a strong connection between this. And the thing that I'm a bit afraid of is that, especially with Draghi, who was on the screen, that these were the people who were in power over the last decades. So do we actually, is the answer going back to that period? I want to have a better answer than just going back.
Oh, I think that I agree. And for that matter, for what it's worth, again, the Biden administration was not. They were much more, they tried anyway to do much more, to not just to go back to the faith in free trade and faith in free markets. They tried to do more. And if we get decent people back in power, for sure, it's not enough to say, let's turn the clock back and pretend that it's 2015 again. We've learned a lot about what is not adequate. Now, I'm not sure that we know what is adequate. We certainly want more attention to left behind. And actually, if I can say something, one thing I think we learned a lot is that it's not just about money. That if we look at, all right, I'm wandering a bit, but if I wanted to make the case against rampant globalization, I have a funny story, funny example, or not really, but I think about the U.S. furniture industry of all things. Not something you probably don't know about, but starting around 2000, the United States used to be basically self-sufficient in furniture. If you were sitting on a couch, it was made in the United States. Around 2000, we started to have large imports of furniture from China. And it was better furniture and cheaper, and so people bought it, and it displaced a few 100,000 workers in the furniture industry, which in the United States is not a lot of people, right? We got 150 million workers. This was 1.5 million people are fired every month, right? So this was not a large displacement. But where were those workers? They were really in a fairly small part, actually, it turns out, of North Carolina. And communities were destroyed. And it's not, even if people found different jobs or moved to other places and recovered their income, even if the total monetary gains from cheap furniture outweighed, we destroyed communities. And this really does a lot of damage to people's lives. And we should, you can't stop change entirely, but we should have policies that try to preserve things that matter to people, which is not just money, but also community. Which also, I'm sorry, I'm talking too long, but it also means if you ask why is there a populist, I hate the word because they're not really, but why is there this kind of nationalist right in Europe? You see it even in countries that have social safety nets that are beyond the wildest dreams of U.S. progressives. You know,
like the Netherlands.
Netherlands, or I don't know the Dutch economy as well as I should, but I actually, because for U.S. domestic reasons, somehow Denmark became a big, right? And Denmark...
It's all the same for Americans, right?
Right, well,
Denmark,
yeah, they're all the same. You all speak European, right? You know that our Secretary of Defense, at a meeting with Latin Americans, and when someone spoke in Spanish, he said, I only speak American. So I only speak American, you only speak European. But anyway, but we look at these countries that have, beyond the wildest dreams, they have effective universal health care and a strong income floor and strong unions and high wages, and they're still a radical nationalist right. So it's not a guarantee, but I think part of the issue is that even countries that are very good at preserving people from financial distress are not very good at preserving them from social distress.
Thomas, you also wanted to talk about big tech. We touched on it with Mr. Krugman already. And the big question, of course, for us in Europe is how can we become less dependent of American big tech companies?
Yeah. There is, I think we all agree that this dependence, apart from the economic picture, so you're saying we all profit from the cheaper iPhones and apps, which is a nice thing, but the political power of these companies is so huge that we want to get rid of that, and Europe is lagging far, far behind. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, she has been announcing, okay, what we need is the European champions. So it looks like their policy is going to change from antitrust cutting up big companies and avoiding these takeovers, mergers and acquisitions to a different kind of policies, some sort of emulating the US and creating these big champions. Is that the right way forward, or is there another path? Because it seems that we try to be the US, and to me, it's not a good thing to strive for a European monopolist either.
Yeah, and the answer is that this is really hard. That at some level, clearly, I would say clearly, Europe needs to reduce its dependence. You do not want to live in a world where Elon Musk can determine your destiny. And but on the other hand, if you manage to create a Dutch Elon Musk, would that be any better? And so
sitting next to you.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, this is something. I'm now just spitballing here because this is really hard stuff. And I think the question one should ask is to what extent are there different models? And certainly in tech, it's not clear that the few giant corporations model on which the U.S. technology sector is based is the only way to go. Actually, rather weirdly, China has a lot more competition in its tech industry than the United States does. But anyway, this is something to be explored. I think it's something to be looked at with an open mind, but also with the sense that the status quo is not acceptable. And if that sounds like an evasive answer, it is.
Yeah.
And the situation, shouldn't we accept that in some industries you do get monopolies if you don't do anything? Because there's just bigger companies, they earn a lot of money, then they take over the competition and they become even bigger. And we see that not only in big tech, but in a lot of other industries. So the idea of if you let markets just continue and don't do anything, you don't end up with a nice competitive economy, but you get a lot of oligopolies or monopolies, and that's the situation what we are in.
Yeah, I mean that if I can say, the United States invented antitrust. That was 110 years ago or so. We just realized that this was a problem, and there's never been a perfect solution. But the idea that you do need that market power is a problem not just because it leads to higher prices. And one of the problems we got was thinking that prices were the only issue, but also issues of power. That having a few, when we used to talk about robber barons, that was not just about them making money, but it was about them having too much power. And of course, the modern oligarchs make the robber barons of the 19th century look like nice guys. So yeah, and this is going to be hard. And of course, let's be clear: it's not only the really, really big companies that you think of tend to be American, but sometimes technology just sort of wants an individual company to dominate. If you want to use upper level ultraviolet technology to produce chips, there's a Dutch monopoly. ASML is the only place to go, and which is probably okay because nobody really worries about the possible impact of Dutch imperialism on world geopolitics. but still, these are hard things, and I think in the United States there's no question. It's easy because we have those companies, and they clearly are too big. Does Europe need to be a little more? How much does Europe needs to try to have some of its own people in that club of companies, and how much does it need to worry about antitrust itself? And this is hard stuff, and it requires
another Substack, I suppose.
Well, it requires a bit more than that. It requires people to actually know what they're talking about, which in this case I don't.
But how come the economics profession doesn't put more emphasis on this thing? Because we see it happening in a lot of industries, and if you look at what we teach in a lot of places, I don't know if you are teaching that, but in a lot of places they still teach, okay, we'll let the markets go and we have nice competition and prices will go down and everybody can have cheap goods. So can't we go back to this time when we actually realized antitrust was very necessary?
Well, there's more of that being taught, but Look, I can go on into the... I think the economics profession does a lot of good in the world, but it has problems like anything else. And there are actually two things going on. One is simply models that of a world of perfect competition where markets always get it right happen to be beautiful. And the desire to go with models that are beautiful rather than true is always a problem in my field, in our field. But the other is, well, have you heard the line? This goes back to a century ago, U.S. commentator, who said that it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. And if you think about the, where did the big private sector support for economics come from? It's not going to be lots and lots of money for people researching the problems caused by monopoly power.
Thomas, thank you for your contribution. I'd also like the audience, or give the audience the possibility to ask a question to Mr. Krugman. Are there any volunteers? Please raise your hand. Someone here in the front. Could you stand up, please? The microphone's coming your way.
Oh, natuurlijk. I have a question about your new trade theory with your Nobel Peace Prizes, Nobel Economic Prizes. Your assumption of new trade theory is about imperfect competition, right, and drives by true drivers, as economies of scale and the consumer demand for variety, if I recap it very simply. Yeah. And when you did that research in the 70s, the big share of the rich countries was production. Right now, it's mostly service-oriented, I think, in comparison to the 70s. And the service also, some services are very based on, very scalable, like big tech. And some services are not easy to scale, like tutoring or whatever, education. So do you have any critique on your own Nobel Prize at that time? Because the situation actually changed, because more service-oriented and a new type of service that's actually scalable.
We are very direct, Mr. Krugman, in Holland.
Yeah.
So.
No, and it's a fair question, and the new trade theory and the new economic geography, or actually, it's one of my curses that now people talk about the old new trade theory and the old new economic, So, but these are. I used to say that there was even at the time that we were developing those models, there was I used to say a kind of a steampunk feel to them. People who read science fiction will know what I mean. There was a slightly sort of 19th century feel to the models, even when people like me were writing them down circa 1990. So it's now some of it, but I would say that first of all, services are in some cases similar. That tradable services are also subject to economies of scale and clustering effects. And it's also true that with the rise of oh dear, well, we're all waterproof here. With the rise of industrial production in developing countries, a lot of the examples that I used to use of industrial clusters tended to be rather old. They tended to be sort of 1910 in the United States, but now China is full of industrial clusters that are fundamentally similar, conceptually at least, to the industrial clusters of the United States or Europe in the early 20th century. So it's, I don't think the theories lose their validity particularly, but obviously you need to, certainly we need to update the examples to be realistic. But look, I live in a service sector, in a cluster, a tradable service sector cluster, otherwise known as New York City. And the logic of New York City is not that different from the logic of the detachable collars and cuffs industry of Troy, New York in 1910, right? It's totally different products, but the underlying economics is not really that different.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. Any more questions? Please raise your hand. On the other side. Yeah. If you could please stand up.
Oh. Good evening, Mr. Krugman. I studied international economics, so I studied all your books. This is about 3 decades ago. The question for tonight was, we spoke about the rise of populism. We spoke obviously about, do we not go back to the economics of the past? One of the things we didn't really touch on was austerity economics. You were one of the early critics. Just wonder, looking back now on austerity as we've applied it in a lot of countries, has that debate been settled according to yourself?
Debates in economics are often never settled because people never admit that they were wrong and the same stuff comes back again. I thought that by 2013 already, we knew we had all the empirical evidence we needed to say that the claims of the enthusiastic advocates of austerity were wrong. That we knew that the evidence was overwhelming that austerity policies in the face of a depressed economy were destructive. Even within the euro area, the whole, we must have austerity because the problem is these unsustainable levels of debt and talking about Mario Draghi, and then Mario Draghi said 3 words, whatever it takes, and suddenly the debt crises sort of melted away, and it turned out it was really a liquidity problem and not a fundamental debt problem. But of course, these debates are never independent of circumstances. So if you want to ask, is there a problem of fiscal imbalances? Is there a problem of high debt levels today? Yes, there is. That doesn't mean that we should revert to sort of the mindless austerity policies that did so much damage in the early 2010s. But if you ask, do I think that it's okay that the United States, which is currently still probably close to full employment, is running a budget deficit of 6% of GDP? No, I don't think it's okay. But of course, given my politics, I think the way out of that is mostly more revenue, not less spending. But still, there's a difference. The austerity debates, Europe did itself a great deal of damage with austerity policies in 15 years ago. I think that the evidence is really clear about how that worked, and that basically that in a way that textbook economics was right about the effects of fiscal austerity in a depressed economy. That is not, unfortunately, all that relevant to where we are now. Now we have different problems.
Thank you. On to the next question, please.
I would like to ask you to talk about the idea of a 2% tax levy on wealth, like the likes of Piketty and Krugman are promoting.
Yeah, I think the economics is almost trivial. There's absolutely no reason to believe that wealth taxes at the levels that I know Krugman really well, and that wealth taxes at the level that he's proposing would do a great deal of economic damage. The questions are mostly about can you really enforce it? Is it administratively possible? And of course, before you can even get to that point, is it politically possible? But the idea that there are major incentive effects, that if you impose what is still not by no means a crippling tax on wealth, that the entrepreneurs will just walk away and stop innovating. That's fundamentally silly. But of course, that's one of the, I said the debates in economics really never end. And the idea that low taxes on rich people is the secret to prosperity, that idea will never go away. It doesn't matter what the evidence is, because there's always enough money behind. There are big rewards on anybody who says, yes, we must have low taxes on wealthy people. So, but no, I would love to see it. I mean, it would be a great step forward. And we used to have much higher taxes on capital income. The greatest period of economic expansion in the Western world was the 30 years after World War II, which was a period of much higher taxes on capital than anything we have now.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, so I didn't study economics, but I studied geopolitics with Mr. Boekestijn, and he taught
Good to
us-
hear.
Sorry, with who? Sorry?
With Mr. Boekestijn. And he taught us, broadly speaking, that there's 3 levels to geopolitics, being geography, the institutions, and the leadership. And I was wondering what your opinion is on which one is leading right now in the world.
Sorry, there was, sorry, geography.
Geography, institutions, and leadership.
Yeah.
So is Trump more important, or the geography of the U.S.?
Oh, wow. That's kind of a cosmic question.
He's a great professor, yeah.
No, I mean, let me tell you that there's again, I'm finding funny countries to talk about here, but I'm currently fascinated by Canada, which is not usually Canada is famously, from the U.S. point of view, is supposed to be a boring country, but it really isn't. But right now we actually have a conflict between leadership and geography, because and I guess at some level institutions. But Canada has a very smart leader who is trying to demonstrate some independence from the United States, but geography makes that really, really hard. It's even if you look at the map, it's wrong, because if you actually ask where there's people in Canada, it's basically a 100-kilometer wide strip across the top of the United States. So, I sometimes say that Canada is closer to the United States than it is to itself. And so, how much can Carney really emancipate? But anyway, that's. But yeah, I mean, I of all people, given some of my past research, should believe that geography is often destiny, but maybe not totally.
Anything to add, Arend Jan?
It's a very interesting point. Canada is so close to the United States, so it's completely dependent. But we see Carney, which is a very wise man. He also made the argument, if the middle powers cooperate, then they can counterbalance the Americans and the Chinese, which is true, of course. And until now, Carney seems to be supporting the Canadian interests. Trump says the most terrible things, but he's not doing them. He's not doing them.
Yeah.
Hij doet het ook pas net, die podcast.
I'm getting old.
There's a joke about that if there's ever a war between the U.S. and Canada, I don't think that's going to happen. But that the Canadians, every time they fire a missile at the United States, they will say sorry, because they're very polite.
Thanks for your question. Yeah, we have space for a few more.
Yeah, so I think the third topic we didn't really talk about was the institutions, building on your question. When Trump first got elected, I kind of lost my trust in the American public. But now that I've seen this video of the federal judges, I'm kind of losing hope in the American institutions. Can you maybe sprinkle some of your hope onto your expectations?
We could do with some, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, something we kind of always knew is that institutions, in the end, institutions are people. The institutions only matter insofar as people believe that there's some importance to honoring the rules that they have agreed to. And we have all of these institutions on the international levels to trade institutions. We have trade agreements. We have a World Trade Organization, which still matter in some parts of the world, but matter to the United States only because the U.S. elite believed that it was important to adhere to the rules. That when the WTO ruled that the U.S. tariff was illegal, the United States would say, "Okay, we disagree, but we will obey that." And you reach a point when you have people who say, "No, never mind." And now, looking at the United States, you could say, "Well, my God, what do the institutions matter? Why does rule of law matter? Because we have all these people who don't care at all." But the truth is, even now, the Supreme Court grudgingly ruled that 70% of Trump's tariffs were illegal. And those tariffs went away. Now Trump turned to another avenue to try and reimpose the tariffs, which is also illegal and will eventually be ruled so. But he did not get them all back. So even in the United States, even now, the institutions still matter. But of course, if you have people for whom, look, the Soviet Union had a very benign constitution. Nobody, it didn't matter at all, right? But but I do think there are a lot of people. I do think that we can reconstitute. If we can get through this crisis, we can reconstitute the institutions. And we obviously need stronger safeguards than we used to have. We need to realize that you can't trust in institutions unless you also make sure that the people in those institutions respect them. But I don't think that the days of useful institutions are behind us.
Jan?
Professor Krugman, do you believe that the idea, the notion of the rule of law is sufficiently enshrined in the American soul that if Trump continues to erode it, that they will go massively on the streets?
Oh boy. I mean, there are many people. It's not. I don't want to be to trivialize this, but look, many. Let me put it this way: while there are many people in the United States who really do care and will really try to defend the rule of law, nonetheless, if Trump had not imposed if he had kept the economic policies of Joe Biden in place and had not started a war with Iran, we might well be doomed. Because it's, in the end, it's the people appalled by the violation of American ideals and institutions, but they're not enough. It also requires the people who are appalled by the price of gasoline for us to have a chance of saving this thing. So, in a way, thank you to the crazy people. Thank you, Peter Navarro. Thank you, Pete Hegseth, because you are democracy's only hope.
We have space for one more. Yeah, time for one more. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Krugman. I've heard that you are scared to death. I've also noted that you're optimistic, which I'm glad to hear. I have difficulties in understanding the US, especially the administration, and at the same time, I have very strong opinions. What are the major mistakes the Europeans make in their perception of the US?
Oh, wow. Again, that's a little bit cosmic, but look. And first, we're a whole continent. People are very different. People who live in my neighborhood in New York City are very, very different from a lot of. But no, I think the main. At this point, I think the biggest problem is not. I think Europe has probably caught on to the fact that the United States is not the benign hegemon that it was, but I don't think they've caught on to the limitations of the United States. The fact of the matter is that people are still acting as if the United States is a dominant power that can punish Europe, and really. Right now, Trump is still tries to bully Europe the way he can bully Republican senators, and he does not. He can destroy a Republican senator in the primary. He cannot do that to Europe. So, just understand that we are not 10 feet tall. And we're shrinking, so bear that in mind.
Yeah, Thomas.
So now we have a more fragmented world with different power blocks, but we still talk a lot about who's on top, growing our GDP. In the meanwhile, we have a planet with limited resources. How do we avoid that all these power blocks try to beat the other person, and in the meanwhile we completely destroy our planet?
Okay, Finish off with a very hopeful question.
Yeah,
I think we did. Thanks for that one. That was a good point, definitely. Yeah.
One that we didn't get into, but if I had to say, aside from the fact that I think the decency of many people is one of the things that gives me hope, but the other is that certainly in terms of resources, environment, technology has turned out to be our friend. I mean, we're now at a point where the Trump administration is trying to force people to keep burning fossil fuels because the economics overwhelmingly now favor renewable energy, right? And so I think that it will not take very much we do not have to live in a world of great power competition for scarce resources, and certainly not on the scale we used to. I mean, we're now in a world where basically it requires a lot of stupidity to think that we need to control oil, that we need to keep on, or coal, God help us. So I don't think that is as big. I would have been much more concerned about the fragmented world being unable to coordinate on basically environmental goals 10 years ago than I am now. Because right now, actually, what is planet-friendly is also economically sensible. Mm-hmm. So we happen to be in a sweet spot on technology, and it's only politics that stands in the way.
Yeah. Mr. Krugman, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us tonight in Amsterdam.
Thank you.
And Thomas Bolle, of course, as well. Thank you for your contribution. We got a request from the Krugman team to make a picture with all of you and Paul Krugman. So if you would be so kind to stay in your seat for 1 second. This picture will be sent to the US, so he has proof that there was indeed a full room again with people who love to listen to Paul Krugman. So if that's okay, the photographer will come on stage. Or stand up even, that's maybe easier. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. So, thank you. Thanks again. Dank u allemaal voor het komen. En naar vanavond naar Pakkers en Zwijger. En de podcast staat vanaf morgenmiddag. Kunnen jullie horen hoe het was? Heel grappig. Dank voor het komen. Tot ziens. Ja, sure. Thanks so much.